I'll introduce Dave now. Dave Coates is, we're lucky to have him. He's the president of ErgoRisk. He has lots of experience working with many different industries, including extensive work with the forest industry. And this focuses on ergonomics and basically helping workers move safely throughout their workday and minimizing injuries. So Dave will be with us for an hour, and he's said he's interested and available to answer questions even beyond that hour. So that's great. Okay. So Dave, I think that's a good intro. Why don't we just turn it right over to you to get into the meat of the information.
Great. So I'll just give a little background on myself. My training's in kinesiology, which is the study of human movement, and specializing in ergonomics. Probably the last, I'm also a physiotherapist, so I've dealt with a lot of rehabilitation scenarios, return to work, trying to help people when their capacity has been affected by an injury to get back into physical activity, not just in athletics, but primarily in occupational settings over the last 20 years. Heavily involved in on-site rehabilitation clinics and basically specific workplace issues with respect to the body, whether it's prevention or rehabilitation. Slipping, tripping injuries. I kind of got dragged into this issue about 10 years ago with different clients. One of my specialties is footwear and foot conditions, and I've been put in charge of a couple of boot programs with clients. I helped develop Canadian Pacific's boot program recently, and so I'll be talking about proper footwear. And if you have any questions about footwear or about work boots, don't hesitate to ask any questions. I'll be addressing some of those issues as well. So we'll just dive in. And now that everybody knows that they can jump in at any time, I've done quite a bit of speaking over my career, so I love hearing myself talk. So please feel free to interrupt me. You won't be affecting my flow by any means. I can always jump back in. And get my slides going. So as far as the outline of what we're going to cover today, my bent is on movement, which in listening to Daryl's comments about how she's interested more in the human factors thing, both in processing, why people are in a hurry. I'll also be talking about physical things with respect to the human factor. I put that under being a good industrial athlete. I'll make the connection between a worker and an athlete. Basically, if you're making, my definition is if you make a living using your body, okay, just like an athlete is paid to perform and primarily use their body, there's a lot of workers that their body is required for performing their job, and the principles that keep a professional athlete in the game, a lot of those principles have to be carried over if you want to have success. We'll be talking about musculoskeletal injuries, specific to slip, trip, falls, some of the issues that I've experienced, and then we'll get into the risk factors and practical ideas that hopefully you can utilize. So starting off, one of the challenges that I find in dealing with workplaces is for some reason there's this disconnect between somebody's body and the physicality of their job and all the science and sports science and athletic world that has developed all sorts of knowledge that has proven that, warming up will prime your ability to use your body. You need proper strength and flexibility. You need certain joints to move well with good strength. You need other joints to stabilize well so that your arms and legs can push off a stable core, for example. There's lots of information out there. but for some reason workplaces haven't embraced the fact that the body has to be considered when it comes to the workplace, even though the body is taxed sometimes just as much as any sport you can imagine, okay? And especially when we're talking about walking through the woods and dealing with unpredictable environments. You know, the range of motion and the agility required to safely navigate a cut block is quite astounding, yet the culture in that organization doesn't deal with preparing the body, warming up, making sure that people have good core stability. There's no resources to have people make sure their body's actually ready to go or prepared for the type of work they do. It's just kind of assumed people have the proper ability, the proper movement habits, the proper knowledge to take care of aches and pains, all the things that an athlete gets a veritable team around them for, of, you know, a dozen people looking after everything from nutrition to physical fitness to technique. Well, there's a lot of technique, there's a lot of fitness, there's a lot of things involved with keeping the body going, and we can't just think that doesn't matter when it comes to workplaces, okay? So that's just one of the things I want to establish right out of the gate, and that's what I've kind of devoted my professional life to, is getting industry to realize you're using human bodies to execute work tasks. You can't ignore the requirements of a human body. If you do, you're going to have a lot of injuries, you're going to have a lot of problems, and you'll be constantly catching up to the issues that arise from ignoring what the body's required. And a lot of this is personal responsibility too, but we'll talk about what companies can do to set expectations for employees, as well as resources for employees, and that goes a long way. Having people realize that that their organization thinks this stuff matters. So,
well, they're not here. Something.
Oh, have you missed? Have you just been listening, watching me mime?
No, we just had Trish just logged in. Welcome, Trish. Glad to see you finally got the audio connected. So carry on, Dave.
Okay, sorry. So anyway, so for preparing the body for activity, I've linked a. I know that there's a warm-up poster for this group, but I think it would be good just to show one of the. This was a project that I just did for Forest BC, and I just wanted to take everybody through a common warm-up program. So this is a video of me doing a little intro to warming up, how to do it properly. So this is a video that a lot of our clients are ascribing to. Okay, let's remember good technique before we do our routine. With every exercise. The first part is just talking about moving properly. I'll just kind of go through the exercises. Now this one is very specific to slipping, tripping issues. We call it the core push-pull. And this was actually, this does a couple things. You'll see that my hands in the picture, I'm pushing my fist into my palm. At the same time I'm pushing in with my arms, I'm trying to spread my feet apart. So I'm actually activating the muscles on the outsides of my thighs. So I'm going in the opposite direction. What this does is it activates your inner core muscles deep to your spine that are very important for balance and coordination. The other thing that this does is it actually, there's been studies that show that this fires up your, what's called the reticular activating system of your central nervous system, of your brain. And this, in seniors, people that do research on how to get seniors and people with movement problems to reduce slip, trips, and falls. That's where a lot of the research is on slip, trip, and fall right now, is with the elderly population. And what they've found is that firing up the reticular activating system really reduces movement errors, and it's something that even healthy bodies can use. So basically, I do this push into the fist. At the same time I'm trying to spread my feet apart. My feet aren't moving, but I'm activating the muscles on the outside of my thighs. And then I'll just go till I switch here. Now what I'm doing is I'm pulling my hands apart, and as I'm pulling my hands apart, I'm actually trying to bring my feet together. So now the muscles on the inner thighs are being activated. Now this one's in your poster that is available on the website. But this is super important for the morning. It really fires up your core. Like I said, it fires up your central nervous system. It fires up a lot of the systems that have to come to the party when it comes to dealing with uneven ground. So that's one of the exercises that's super important. The power squats is my favorite warm-up in the morning. This is basically basic body mechanics going on here, where we're bending from the hips with a neutral spine. We're working our core stability. We're not bending through our back. We've got proper leg, proper bending at the knees, where the knee isn't coming too far forward over the toe. So it's mostly happening in the hips. This reinforces proper lifting. This reinforces proper body use in general. So and it uses some of the bigger muscles in the body. So it's very important for getting the body moving. This gets blood flow to where you need it. You can imagine when you're on uneven ground that if these muscles are going with good core stability, it's going to really help your balance. Okay, so the power squats is I think fundamental. And I'm heading into my mid 40s now, and knowing that a lot of employees are getting 45 plus, 50 plus, I think a warm-up, I don't understand workplaces that don't warm up the bodies when there's physical work to be done. So I think it has to be an absolute must. The groin stretch, this muscle often bears the brunt of slip trips, especially on low traction scenarios. It's a good idea to get the inner thigh muscles a little bit more resilient, get some blood flow. There's a lot of balance involved here as well. Again, there's some core stability going on, and especially if you take your hands off your thighs and hold yourself up. But very important to get the muscles on the inner thigh going and bending at the right place. You'll see I'm sticking my butt back, keeping my knees back over top of my ankle, not letting the front knee go too far forward there. Very important exercise before. This one I put together specifically for slip trips, so that's why I'm showing it. The forward lunge one, it's always good to put a challenging stance, and a very large stride stance is important. This takes a fair amount of balance. You don't have a lot of side-to-side support in this stance, so you really have to work your muscles to keep yourself oriented. Okay, so it's a great exercise to do in the morning to make sure that the legs are coming to the party. Okay, and basically this is my favorite. You guys don't have this one. I asked my colleague Rob Fontaine kind of put these slides together in the poster. We call this the Karate Kid, and this is a mainstay for people that have work surface challenges, especially if you're walking in the woods. There's a lot of, you keep your knee bent on your standing leg. You don't have a straight knee. You can't see that, but you keep your knee unlocked on your support leg. And basically you are really working the thigh muscles, the knee muscles, the ankle muscles. If you've ever done this stork stance, there's a lot of stuff going on at the hip, the core, everywhere. So this is real basic stuff that any athlete early in the morning wouldn't even consider trying to use their body in any kind of a stressful way without getting things fired up. Now this isn't stretching. Like there's a little bit of stretching going on here, but what we're talking about is warm up, body preparation, and basically getting things fired up, getting the coordination going, making sure that the knee is ready to go if there's a uneven ground scenario, and it's basically priming the pump. Okay, getting things going. So that's basically a morning warm-up. Now, before I leave these, does anybody have any questions about any of these exercises or the importance of it, or some of the challenges with getting it going within an organization? Because I've been involved in that quite a bit as well.
I've got a question, Dave. It's Gerard here. You know, since we're heading into winter, you can experience some really cold weather.
How many people have warm-ups going on in their organization right now? I will wait till you take your mute off, people.
That's Robin here in Vancouver.
Webinar here.
Go ahead, Robin. I can hear you. Ask your question, or did you have comments about warm-ups?
Yeah, no, I like the idea. You know, I've worked in the bush for 40 years. You know, I'm 65 years old now, but I go to the bush without warming up and pretend that I'm still 30 years old.
Yeah.
So it's a super idea.
Yeah. Do you go into the bush every day?
No, that's the other part. Probably going to the bush 4 or 5 times per month. And again, you know, taking, you know, I have a young intern in my company, and I'm also taking people from, you know, First Nation community folks that don't get to the bush very often either. So it's a super idea.
Yeah. So these are really good. One thing I'll be talking about in more detail, but make sure you do a little boot audit on anybody that you're taking into the bush. You know, loose clothing. Some things that I see that we see on engineers and foresters is they'll leave their vests open and things like that can get snagged and affect their balance. So make sure you go through a little checklist if you're going with a green person. And one of the things we found out from ourselves because we get let into the bush as visitors all the time, and a lot of our hosts do not realize how trained and adept they are at the path that they're taking. And they've done it 1,000 times. They know the line they want to take. They know a lot about what they're doing, and they go too fast for leading somebody that is not familiar with the environment. And they don't even realize how fast they're going. So if you do lead somebody into the bush, you really need to gear down and go much slower than you think is slow. If you think you're going slow, slow down even more, and really take it step by step. I'm sure that you'd have a technique like that, but man, are we ever surprised? Because, and you know, most of our people are in, you know, because we espouse using the body properly in fitness, so we're all relatively fit people that go out and help these companies. We work out, we keep our bodies in shape, and a lot of clients will look at us and think, oh, you know, this person's in shape, they'll keep up. Wow, what a mistake that is. The processing that goes on. Daryl was talking about the human factor. There's a lot of processing going on when you're in a walking through the woods scenario, and you really train yourself with what you're doing, especially if you're paying attention. So if you have a guest, I can't stress enough how important it is to really slow down and actually mentor them through navigation through the woods. And I'm sure that's actually probably exactly what you're doing, Robin, when you're taking these people, you're trying to actually train them a little bit, I'm sure. But do you find that you've caught yourself going too fast just because of your experience?
Yeah, it's always seemed like a bit of a, you know, more of a competitive thing. You know, the faster, you know, if you're a good, you know, call it a bush bunny or whatever, able to zip through the forest pretty fast, it means that you're more skilled. But oh, the trick I use with a lot of the First Nations that are just new to the forest is talking a lot about the traditional, you know, foods and plants and things like that. So lots of opportunity to slow down and look at the other parts of the ecosystem, not just the forest that we're there to look at.
Very good. Yeah. Anybody else have any experience with warm-ups or any things we've talked about so far?
Hey, Dave. It's Rachel here. Not necessarily looking at warm-ups for walking through the bush, but in the Prince George department here, we're transportation safety, and so we deal a lot with log truck drivers And slips, trips, and falls are certainly that's the number one injury that that truck drivers incur. So, would you have any recommendations? Would this type of warm-up be something that you would recommend for truck drivers as well?
Absolutely. Truck drivers have quite the step height, I find, on getting in and out of their vehicles. Of course, three-point contact facing. The big thing with truck drivers is a lot of them do this sort of halfway facing the ground, half facing the truck. Sure, they might have three-point contact, but when they get off their trucks, they're sort of, they think that facing the ground, especially when they're halfway down, is kind of an okay thing. And getting trained to face the vehicle, facing the truck, whether you're getting on and off the back deck or into the cab at all times when you're going up or down. When you face the vehicle, you can control your momentum, take a lot of load off your knees. You don't do that last 2-foot drop that can really catch up on the cartilage and the meniscus in the knee. No sort of hopping down the last little bit. Sometimes that's necessary on certain machinery you'll find in the bush, but sometimes it's more of a softer landing for when you're actually in the woods. But whenever possible, having steps or some process of having three-point contact all the way to the ground is something to strive for. I realize it's not always possible, but there's a big difference between being careful on that last couple feet and, you know, hopping down each time. That's a high-risk thing. As far as warm-up goes, getting the legs going and getting some blood flow, because your body is sedentary most of the day when you're driving a truck. Depending on, you know, they're getting more and more automatic. I know some of the older trucks are more of a workout than anything, but that exercise, the core push-pull exercise, if you've been sitting and in a truck for a long time, this exercise you can do in sitting. It was the first one I showed here. Is basically getting the body fired up. This one here, you can do this. There's, you know, butt squeezes that I've recommended for drivers. There's pushing their legs out against their hands to get the muscles on the outside of their thighs going. There's, you know, putting a 2-fist width. I'll try and get this, a 2-fist width between the knees and squeezing your knees together that can fire the core. Just getting the muscles activated, because it's a little too late to realize that your leg muscles are half asleep when you're halfway out of the vehicle and you're trying to find a step and you're over 50 and maybe you've had an old disc injury and your balance is off. And a lot of these folks, I've seen them clamber out of the truck and I don't think they knew where their body was, and even by the time they got to the ground. It was just lucky that they didn't fail because they hopped out of the truck and they didn't think about it. And as we get older, your body's just not there right away. So having them do some type of little preparation, especially if it's poor weather and they're just sitting in the truck, why not do some isometric muscle contractions in the legs if they know they're going to be getting out of the vehicle soon. Just getting some things fired up can always be worthwhile. And the micro breaks, like shoulder shrugs for people driving the truck, because it's usually reaching out with your arms. So having a little pocket card that has shoulder shrugs, postural rebalancing exercises, there's all sorts of things you can do with truck drivers to keep the blood flowing during the day with relatively sedentary work. Okay.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else have any other comments or experience with warm-ups? Okay. I will carry on then. So basically, after that, it's the safe movement. Now, there's some skills required with moving our bodies, with climbing on and off equipment, walking through the woods, and those skills requires that the body's not only warmed up, but the body has certain abilities. And I don't want to stress the body too much here, because the mind is actually more important than the body when it comes to slips and trips. There has to be this situational awareness scenario where I'm now climbing onto a piece of equipment. I can't be thinking about anything else. Some of the errors that I've seen, and you can put these on observational on checklists if you have an organization that you want to put this in your safety program. you can have little audit forms or checklists that look for things like three-point contact, easy enough. But when you actually look for three-point contact and you discuss with drivers and operators about three-point contact, you will be surprised how many pieces of equipment do not allow three-point contact because there's not a grab point at certain places, there's not a step at certain places. And I've been involved with lots of companies that espouse three-point contact. I was just working with a ready-mix company, and all their truck drivers, you know, slip, trips, and falls on and off equipment was a big injury. We did movement safety guidelines. We did videos on how to get it move around the truck, and we went through the exercise. I would say probably 40% of the trucks you couldn't do three-point contact properly because the grab bars were either non-existent or not in the right place, but yet the company had been talking about use three-point contact, you know, all the time. So you actually have to make this a physical exercise, a frontline sort of safety little toolbox topic, and go out to the equipment and say, we're going to do a three-point contact on all of the vehicles this morning. We're going to go up and down, and we're going to watch each other do it. And doing that simple exercise, you'd be amazed how much you're going to learn about your equipment, how much you're going to learn that there's some young employees. There was this one young employee that was honest and said, you know what, this is the first time I've been shown three-point contact. I really didn't know what everybody was talking about. So here you have a new employee, probably a year in, heard three-point contact. Everybody assumed everybody knew what three-point contact was, but this employee had never been shown and demonstrated exactly what three-point contact means in different situations. So having the expectation everybody uses three-point contact and actually training people and showing people this is what it means, this is what it means for you on this piece of equipment. Some companies are going so far now as they're making video, putting it in induction videos for certain departments. This is what three-point contact looks like. This is what it is. The numbers come up on the video, 1 point, 2 point, 3 point. This is what we're talking about. Don't underestimate how unclear three-point contact can be. I've seen it. Okay. And the other point that I find is important when we're talking about skills is the ability to anticipate what a loss of balance or what a slip or trip consequence would be. And this is a great safety meeting activity as well. You walk people through some of their more common work activities, whether it's out in the woods or whether it's just getting people in and out of their equipment or vehicles. What would happen if you lost your balance or you had a slip or trip incident in these different scenarios? And that is a real eye-opener for people because they'll often be doing things day to day and they don't really think about it. But if you actually stop everybody and say, okay, what if you lost your balance right here on this equipment or coming out of this truck? What if you lost your footing here? And if you kind of walk through it, some of the relatively serious scenarios that can happen, and when you're training somebody to walk through the woods, there's different scenarios. If there's, you know, branches sticking up with sharp ends on them, okay, I'm about to walk through an area that if I slip, you know, there's a possible, I could be impaled here. So maybe I should think differently about this little area as compared to an area that's got a bunch of soft brush and everything looks, you know, pretty tame. So having the brain going through the process of what if I slipped here, what if I tripped here, and how is that going to impact the way I move in this changing situation. It's kind of a situational awareness type of exercise you need to get people to go through. And it has to be practical. It has to be out in scenarios that people are actually in. It doesn't work as well in a safety meeting in a nice dry boardroom. So there's innovative ways of getting this stuff out there and real. And using proper equipment. I heard a noise there. Does somebody want to make a comment or anything?
Hi, Dave. It's Rachel again.
Hi.
I was just wondering about, so I think when you're talking, about you know, finding your path through the bush and you know, choosing kind of the path of least resistance going to get you there. We've always called that bush legs, and just kind of, you just sort of figure it out. So you're just talking about bringing these things up while you're taking someone out to train them, and not, you know, just reviewing it and bringing it forward and actually saying it so that someone thinks about it? Is that kind of what you're...
Yeah, exactly. You can operationalize any skill. If you actually took somebody with good bush legs, so to speak, right, and if you slowed them down and you said, okay, you're about to go through this next 30 feet of bush. We're not going anywhere. I want you to tell me what's going through your mind right now. Well, and you'll get that person saying, I'm going to take this line because I know that when a tree falls like that and the branches look like this, or I've got this situation or that situation, this is going to be the most stable path. If you actually get that person to explain what's going on in their brain, but you have to stop them because they're not conscious about all this stuff. This stuff is going through their brain, you know, thousands of times a second. There's all sorts of information that they're processing, and they don't. If you ask them, they're not really thinking about anything. There's a lot of body reactions going on, but there's a lot of environmental processing going on too, and it would be a great exercise for you because I've actually asked people what they're looking for. And it's tough for them. They can't actually verbalize all of it, but they can verbalize a lot of it. And if you get somebody that's a good communicator, they'll start talking about all of the stuff that's going through their brain and what they're seeing and what they're thinking as they're going through. And if you can just, you know, we're not trying to make it totally scientific for new people going through the bush, but if you can take some pictures, it'd be a great safety meeting to prepare people before they go out. You know, here's some common things that people that are really experienced in the bush see when they look at this. They see this. They see, you know, and training people to when do you walk on the logs and when do you do this, when do you do that, based on experience. Where's the best traction in this scene? And it's quite interesting. You kind of have to just kind of go through it. And if you can actually bring new employees and have somebody that's really good at articulating what goes through their mind when they walk through the bush, there's lots of stuff that's going to rub off. I mean, you might not make it a science, but people are going to get something out of it. I'll guarantee you.
Thank you.
Okay. And so I put the word anticipation here because that is the one thing you need. I find you need buzzwords when you're training employees, and situational awareness is too vague. I mean, that's what you want them to develop, but when you say, oh, you got to be situationally aware, there's so much behind that that they won't be thinking about anything useful at the moment, right? That's more of something they need to develop. As far as the word anticipation, I find that's good, where you just say, okay, anticipate. You're going to pick this path. If whatever you are heading towards gives way, what's the consequence there? And if there's some really dangerous stuff around that path, and you can't guarantee that that path is solid, you don't see a nice solid trunk of a tree, then you know, maybe you have to pick a different path. You know, anticipate the worst case scenario. I find helps with slip trip scenarios. My next point is proper footwear, and this is becoming a real pet peeve of mine with younger employees. I don't know what is going on out there, but everywhere from construction sites to any environment, I am seeing this movement towards keeping your boots mushroomed out at the top and not done up to the top. I see young employees going to, you know, borrowing Uncle Joe's boots from 1956, and they're all worn out, and the boots are older than they are. They don't fit properly. They're too wide. They're a different size than they should be, and just no consideration for footwear in the younger generation. And I'm just seeing it too much in too many industries. So I tend to go on rants when it comes to footwear with young employees, and it really irks me when organizations don't put emphasis on proper footwear, well-fitting footwear, and having boots at the right size and laced up to the top. as part of the PPE. A lot of companies are good at it, but a lot of other companies, they don't even, they don't even look at boots. So that's where the safety leadership comes in. And when it comes to proper fitting boots, I've got, let me see if it's on the next slide here or not. We might just wait. No, it's not for a while. So I'll talk about it a little bit when we get there. But yeah, making sure that boots aren't puckered around the bottom, that they have the features. I'm going to go through what the features of work boots should be. But one thing that I find Gerard was mentioning in the winter and stuff, if you're really serious about preventing slips and trips, your organization needs to really value not only high quality and well-fitting footwear, but really matching the footwear to the environment. A lot of times in the woods, there's not a lot of ice buildup because of the textured ground. But if you do have ice and really hard-packed ground conditions that is susceptible to ice, there are those little slip-on diamond stone type slip-on galosh type things that can increase your traction. I know with Canadian Pacific, they have boots that they put over top of their work boots that have extra traction for ice and snow. There's different scenarios that you can do to increase your traction, because obviously when it comes to slipping, it's a loss of traction scenario. So anything you can do with your footwear to improve the interface with the ground and your footwear is going to be worthwhile. So if you're in mud a lot, every piece of equipment should have one of those wire brushes on the bottom of it to clean your boots before you climb up, or you should have some type of pick that is available to clean your boots off if it's a muddy environment, which is probably the most common in the forest industry. But whatever the case may be, you need to have strategies for improving your traction in whatever scenario you happen to be in. So does anybody have any comments on footwear? I mean, I can rant about footwear just because I've seen so many bad practices, but what's everybody's experience with footwear?
Hi, David. It's Gerard. I think I'll start. The challenge I've always had with footwear in the wintertime is in order to get something warm enough when it's minus 30, usually that means it's very bulky, not that supportive. And then you can compound that when you have to have steel toes. It makes footwear even kind of larger and bulkier. Any thoughts, or have you seen anything coming out lately that's a better solution?
Yeah, I know with the last boot program I was involved in, there was 2 winter boot models that came out that are the same quality, the same fit as normal work boots. So we're not going to like a Sorel type boot that has the big felt liner and the boot swims around, the foot swims around inside the boot. We're talking normal footwear with insulation. Red Wing has a winter work boot. And basically they put the technology in the boot to get the insulation up, and in the wintertime I find a good pair of there's a lot of modern weave socks out there, but there's something about a good pair of wool socks that keeps the moisture out and is really warm. I find old school wool socks in the wintertime work well. Not so much. I always have conversations with workers that are wearing wool socks in the summertime. I think there's better, more modern fabrics out there for summer scenarios. But in the wintertime, I think a good pair of wool socks with maybe a more modern wicking type thinner sock underneath the wool sock to get the moisture away from the skin, and then one of these modern winter work boots that have the right fit, the right support, should be plenty warm for anybody in colder environments. I'm not sure if they've been around. I know in the last few years. Does anybody have experience with winter footwear, winter work boots in the last few years? I know I've selected a couple for a boot program, but I haven't wore them in minus 20. So.
I think from my experience, most people were either wearing Sorels or the, the chainsaw boots with Bamas or whatever the case may be. So that's about what we had found in the past for winter boots. So it's nice to know there's different options out there.
Yeah, it's just in the last 2 years they're definitely. I would look up Red Wing, and as far as I haven't looked into cork boot options lately, but yeah, I would hope that they'd have some options for that as well. Other than I really don't like those rubber boots, those rubber cork boots. Any kind of rubber boot I think is terrible on the foot and your alignment and everything else.
That's Robin here.
Yep.
I wear those chainsaw cork boots, the orange colored ones that have the corks on the bottom. And, with Bama socks and wool sock and like a light, more high-tech sock right against my skin. And, if I'm moving in the winter time, minus 20, minus 30, if you have some movement, they're plenty warm enough. And they, they seem to be, I have leather corks that I wear, in the summer season, but they seem to be very sturdy and provide good stability for me anyway.
Okay, good. The important thing is that you feel the boot, like the boot has to be connected to your foot. So I'm hoping you could get a size, even if it is one of those rubber boots, if you can get the size down so that it fits, your foot is touching the outside of the boot, either through the sock, you might have some layers there, but the important thing is feedback to the ground. You need feedback to the surfaces you're walking on. And the quicker that feedback comes, and usually that means you have to have boots that are laced close to the foot, or the foot can get feedback to the outside or to the bottom of the boot relatively quick. The looser and more sloppy your foot is in the footwear, the less the connection is to the environment and the ground, and the more milliseconds you lose to react. The better fitting your boot, the more connection, the better feedback, the quicker reaction, and that can make the difference between a balanced reaction and a fall. So these milliseconds actually matter to how you navigate. So that's super important. So any other comments on boots? I'm gonna touch on boots again, so we'll move on here, and then I'll show some of the features that I like in footwear. And then dealing with aches and pains. This is another thing that on the topic of the industrial athlete is making sure that people recognize when their body is not 100%, and to make sure that there's some acknowledgement of that, so that people don't set themselves up for an injury because their knee has a little bit of swelling in it, or their ankle's not right. That can really put you at risk with slips and trips. So making sure that that people realize that they need to make sure their body is coming to work. Because if you look at some of these pictures, I mean, there's some pretty intense scenarios going on here. You need the range of motion. You need it in the hips. You have to be able to bend from the right place. And if you don't bend from the right place, you're going to your body's going to get into trouble over time. Okay. So as far as putting it together, as far as the features here, education and training, making sure that people understand what's necessary to avoid slips and trips, everything from the mind and the awareness that we talked about, to making sure that they understand the workplace things that are in place, 3-point contact, what the workplace has gone through to make sure that people can be safe when they're navigating around equipment and to use the equipment that's available. The discomfort management, acknowledging that human bodies get into trouble once in a while, and it's important to acknowledge that and accommodate people to navigate through problems and not set them up for injuries, or for getting an injury worse. And then safety leadership is very important. I find that something as simple as setting the expectation that proper footwear, lace to the top that fits well, 3-point contact, facing the machinery, doing a warm-up, making sure that this stuff is put across as important and it's part of the job. And especially with younger employees, you can set that expectation from day one. And you can get a lot of employees, as they get more mature, start to realize how much they missed the boat over the years on some of this stuff, and they can become champions like you won't believe. So very, very important to get the leadership going on some of these things to try and make an impact. Okay. As far as musculoskeletal injuries go with slips and trips, just as a basic review, we're talking about the muscles that cross our joints, that move our body, the ligaments that hold our bones together at the joints so they don't come apart when we're moving them with our muscles and tendons. And then there's the cartilage that helps our joints move smoothly against each other. Basically, there's two categories. The traumatic sprains and strains, actually, slips and trips is probably your more classic sprain-strain injury because it is kind of a one-time event that happens with a sprain and strain. Whereas back pain and shoulder pain, I often get into conversations with people to understand that, what, it wasn't the last move you made that caused your back injury or your shoulder injury. It was a culmination of poor postures and poor movement habits that eventually caught up with you, and a simple movement finished you off. Slip trips are a little different. They actually do follow a mechanism like this where, your body has a certain capacity. There's a certain demand that goes through your body day to day. And this is the important thing, is you want to have a nice reservoir here, a nice space between what your body can handle and the demands that you put on your body, okay? And even with slip trips, if you have a nice gap here, the chance of you having the demand on your body surpass what your body can handle gets less. So this isn't necessarily an age-related thing. I've seen a lot of younger employees, even though they have a nice gap here, what they manage to figure out how to do is go faster or take higher risks and raise this demand up so that they're, close to their capacity anyway. So I find as we get older, we usually get a little smarter, and we make better judgments on how to use our body. So this gap between demand and capacity can widen even as you get older. So what we need to understand, though, is that this tissue capacity line can actually deteriorate either because of lack of fitness, different things in our lifestyle, not taking care of our fitness, wellness, aging without getting some exercise and without keeping your body in shape. Where you can get into trouble is when these lines get too close together. And this is something that can really get to us. This can be over a day, this can be over a working career, over the years, but here we have tissue capacity slowly kind of going into a tailspin, okay? Maybe a couple things that we're doing. For example, a warm-up in the middle of the day can increase your tissue capacity. Making sure your body's ready to go. If you look over a lifetime, this could be a period of time where you've got yourself in shape. And then maybe you got an injury, and then you rehabilitated yourself pretty good. But where we get into trouble is when the demands of our work life and the capacity of our body starts to get dangerously close together. And if you see my cursor here, if your body's ability to withstand the demands of your life and the demands of your life start getting this close, any little move can finish you off, okay? And this is where the body gets injured on the relatively innocent movements, the normal activities. It wasn't anything that was very demanding that finished you off. And it could also be an innocent slip or trip that was maybe a little balance reaction, whereas if your hips were actually had some flexibility and your body had some good reaction, it might not have turned into a fall that turned into an injury. It might have just been a balance reaction and you're okay. So that's what can happen to the body. That's why having the values of warming up, keeping your body working well, and keeping your body muscle balance and everything in shape is very important. Okay, so when talking about what the body needs, I can't stress enough the importance of having the core working properly. I don't know if any of you have seen modern training techniques. Sidney Crosby was on one of those, was kneeling on one of those big therapy balls, stick handling, a few years back during the Stanley Cup playoffs, and they were showing some of the modern training techniques where you engage the core and use your body while your core is engaged. That is super crucial for navigating uneven terrain. If your core is working and engaging properly, your hips and your legs will work much more coordinated. And especially if your upper body starts to drift from, navigating uneven terrain, your core needs to be able to bring that back and engage your lower body. So what's in between your upper body and lower body is actually, I would argue, the most important part of your body when it comes to avoiding slips and trips. However, we can't ignore the fact that our feet are on the ground, and your ability for your foot and ankle, your knee, your hips to respond and move properly and have the range of motion to get around, get around environments that have uneven ground and a lot of obstacles, or even to climb up in some of the equipment that you have to climb into. That's very important. So that needs, whether that comes across in safety meetings or you have little workshops. We put on workshops for companies where we talk about this stuff, have them do a little movement screen, and just get people to understand, where are they at? Like, do they know how their body's put together? Do they know what their body needs to do some of these tasks that they do every day? A lot of people they don't think about it. They've done it all the time. If you do it every day and you're not getting hurt, sometimes there's this self-selection process that your body kind of gets into the groove, and your body's trained to move that way. Some people don't realize what their body's doing, which is fine as long as their body's doing it right. If your body's not doing it right, it's good to get some. I always think it's a good thing for people to get some awareness about their own body. Where are your muscle imbalances? Where do your joints work well? Where's your range of motion good and your strength good? What are your weak links, and how can you improve on those weak links? And having people get some awareness of their body and get a game plan for their own personal health and wellness to understand, I need some core work, or I need to get more strength in my hips. I need to bend more here. If people have a game plan with their body, it can only be good for them to keep working on that. So that is, now I wanted to go into slip, trip, fall and get into appropriate footwear. Any questions on the last stuff I just talked about before we talk about work boots a little bit more? I don't see anybody unmuting here. So I'll just carry on with work boots then. I have a pair of Red Wing boots here. Let me see if I can get this in front of the camera. So some of the features of a work boot that I find are really important are first, the width of the boot. And I find that a lot of boot manufacturers are not making more than one width anymore. A lot of the boots you'll find today at Mark's Work Wearhouse, for example, are made in China, and they're mass produced, and there's maybe one width, maximum two widths available. And I've been asking these stores, why don't you have these Brannick devices? These, if you recall, there's these silver foot width measurers that have the slide bar, and why aren't work boots being fitted to the width of people's feet? And they say, well, they just have standard last now, and if you have a wider foot, they add more leather to the upper. If you have a narrower foot, they take some leather off, but they're not changing the actual structural width of the boot in a lot of brands. Red Wing is one of the few brands that actually, I think Red Wing has over 7 different foot widths. It's quite amazing the number of widths they have. So you actually get your foot fitted to proper width, And I visited the Red Wing plant when I was in Michigan for a client, or not Michigan, Minnesota for a client. And I had a plant tour, and they actually do have the last that the boot is built on comes in the different widths that the boot's offered. So the entire boot is built to that width, unlike other boots that maybe aren't quite as expensive. So I'm a big believer in boot programs that have enhanced subsidies. So if you get more of a subsidy, the more expensive boot that you buy. I find $160 is kind of the cutoff. If you spend less than $160 on your boots, you have a fortunate foot design and a standard width that happens to fit the boot well, and you're kind of lucky to get away with boots that are under $160. If you're on your feet every day, especially outside, I find you need to go north of $160 to get the quality, to get the features that will really protect not just your foot and ankle, but the rest of your body and keep you healthy. Okay, and some of those features, let's see if I think this is in there, is the heel counter. When you're looking at boots, take your hand, put it at the heel counter of the boot, and just squeeze in. A less expensive pair of boots has very cheap material at the heel counter, and your thumb and fingers will just collapse that material because it's only made of cardboard or something that is not very high quality. So the heel counter needs to fit the heel. Your heel should not move around in a pair of boots, and the heel counter should be snug. The other thing to look for is when you tie your boots up, you should have approximately, I don't know if there's enough light here, but you should have at least 2 fingers or more width between your leather uppers to let you know that your width is right. And when you look at the instep, you should not have any puckered leather at the instep against your foot. You should be able to feel your foot right behind the leather wall on the instep. If the boot's too wide, you'll feel some puckering or some gapping, okay, between the leather and your instep. That's not a good thing because this is where you're getting the feedback from the ground, and the closer the leather is to your foot, the quicker you're going to get the feedback. I like higher boots. I like the 8-inch boots and done all the way up to the top, because the other thing that doing boots up to the top does is this ring around your lower leg. As your boot starts to tilt, okay, this upper ring, if it tugs on the skin of your lower leg, there's receptors, there's skin receptors that let you know that something's happening down below if the boot's done up to the top, okay? And that can help your balance reactions, that can help you change your balance. It gives you quicker feedback to what's happening down below if your boots are done all the way up your lower leg, okay? If you do what I see young workers do and you've got these mushroomed out boots and your pants are stuck in them and the boots are only done halfway up, there's no feedback up there. Your boot starts to go over, you really don't know whether it's going over or not. So the other feature that I like in boots is kind of a last that has some rigidity to it, not too flexible. You'll find that cheaper boots, well, I won't name names, but there's some cheaper boots that you can bend the boot so far that it's like a slipper, and you can twist it and wring it out like a dish rag. Usually if you can do that with a boot, there's not much in it that is giving you a lot of support. They don't tend to have the same technology as a pair of Nike runners, and frankly, you need a lot more stability and support in your work boot. So that's my little sermon on work boots. Any questions on work boots? Anything else? Okay. So as far as the risk factors for slip, trips, falls, we've talked about the environment. We're kind of talking about uncontrolled environments primarily. Obviously, when you're in shops and you're in controlled environments, there's no excuse for not cleaning up as you go and using housekeeping and cleaning up oils and spills, that stuff. I know common sense shouldn't be used in safety management systems, but that's the kind of thing that you really need to push in your workplace. That is, zero tolerance for people leaving slipping, tripping hazards around. But when you're out in the bush and the environments that we've been talking about, your footwear is definitely important. The vest and how you carry your tools. Let's not ignore the fact that if you have a vest scenario, and I'm amazed at how many tools and how much weight some of these foresters and engineers and people that are out in the woods can carry in these vests. I mean, these vests start to weigh, they must be weighing up to 50 pounds sometimes. Just the massive stuff, and the importance of having that vest hug the body and distribute the weight evenly, because if you have weight really distributed off to one side, that's going to affect your balance and your coordination, and it'll affect your alignment too, because you're going to have to move your body the other direction to stay balanced. So keeping weight on these vests equally distributed, the heavier stuff maybe towards the middle, at the back, and I think a lot of the designs are leaning that way. But if you're standing and looking at a cut block, or you're about to head into the woods, and you feel your body getting tugged in one direction before you even start, that's got to be a clue that you're not balanced. So redistribute. And if you're carrying something in your hand, I'm a big believer of being one-handed when I need balance and coordination. So I only carry something in one hand. Depending on the situation, most of the people that I've seen go through the woods, they're pretty good at just letting stuff go if they start to need their hand, and usually the thing they're carrying is something that's pretty indestructible, and it's easy to let that thing go. So making sure that whatever you are carrying is relatively bulletproof to being dropped. The last thing you want to do is be protecting the tools that you're carrying as you're navigating through the woods. Make sure that anything you're carrying can pretty much be dropped and not harmed. And if that's not the case, just realize that you're going to probably try and protect that item with a body reaction that may increase your risk of injury. Okay, so I think most of the tools that I've seen are pretty rugged. So I don't know if anybody wants to pipe in about the stuff that people carry. But that's been my experience. I don't know if there's anything that's too fragile out there that people walk around with. Even the GPS units and some of these fancy pieces of equipment are pretty droppable. But I think they're anchored pretty good. As far as the personal factors, again, it's the asymmetries, it's the muscle balance, it's the body. That's what we're going to go into now. Is we're going to talk a little bit about. I already talked about. I think I've already talked about this stuff. Ensuring your footwear, carrying the loads close, proper vest, backpack, and assess the terrain, make appropriate choices. And we talked about this early on. Another person's trail may not be safe or familiar to you, and to make sure that expectations are set. If somebody's taking somebody else into the woods, make sure you have a little huddle with the two people, and tell the person that is leading the other person into the woods, or that's taking somebody in, to really make sure they slow down and they help that person learn how to navigate. Because because new people try to keep up, and when you try to keep up and you don't know what you're doing, you're going to increase your risk. So that's something I've experienced. So now let's get into some practical prevention ideas. So covering off with employees and doing this stuff during safety meetings, practical movement habits. So little things like keeping your center of gravity directly over your feet, when you're moving around. Robin, you've navigated the woods. Have you thought of the biomechanics that you use, like how you transfer your center of gravity, how you do the things that you do? Have you ever actually thought about it to the point of trying to teach somebody else?
Not so much specifically, but the one part of whatever in the bush is, especially thick bush, there's always a temptation to get up on logs and use the logs and, navigate by going from one log to another. And for myself personally, that's the closest, we're talking about close calls. It's, the unexpected loose bark underneath, a log that's less stable, more rotten than I thought it was going to be. and you're often at a higher height above the ground. And some of the most closer calls is the falling right on the log that you're actually walking on. Is a pretty hard surface as compared to a lot of the brush and bush and moss that's underneath.
Mm-hmm.
Very good point. Yeah, so taking new people, like, I have and lots of people who worked in the bush a while or out on log booms and things like that. They're pretty skilled on walking on a log. They make it look easy. And you can certainly get a young, newer person into trouble by following you around on these logs.
Yeah, good point. One thing for me, I'm always a rookie when I go out there because I'm not in the woods enough to become adept at it, although I'm in the woods enough to know what I can and can't do, which is an important level of development as well for avoiding these injuries. And one thing that I find as somebody that always feels like they're learning this stuff all over again is, sitting down. If I'm walking on a log, sit down on the log and slide off the log to the ground, and not being afraid to slide around instead of jumping down or jumping to the next thing. I find that a lot of people think that it's kind of like stones over a river. They got to jump from one log to the other or jump from one solid place to another solid place, when actually you can just slide off that log and make your way to the next area, and you don't have to keep jumping and leaping. That's another tendency that I think people need to lose when they're in the woods, until they're very experienced or they know what they're doing. But even then, it's a pretty full commitment when you jump from one place to another. Sometimes you don't have a choice, but yeah, there's definitely there's some learning curves, and yes, it is getting your bush legs, but don't fall into the trap of thinking that getting your bush legs is just letting somebody learn this stuff on their own and make all the mistakes themselves and they'll figure it out. If you corner somebody like Robin that's been doing this a long time and really push Robin to actually verbalize the stuff that he's figured out, you'll get a whole little curriculum of how to get through the woods, like good little tips like he just gave. And every little thing will help, especially somebody that's new at it. And it's nothing wrong, and there's nothing wrong with refreshing people that maybe think they know what they're doing already and talking about some of the scenarios that other people have gone through. So that's probably a big part of avoiding slips and trips in the woods, is sharing experiences between experienced workers and doing that in a safety meeting and making sure people understand that this stuff is worth talking about, because you can get seriously hurt. The warm up and stretches, I think that that's a no-brainer. Your body will be more ready to go if you put it through a few drills. If you're lucky enough to have like walking up a gravel road and then you gradually increase the technical ability or the technical requirements of your moving and of your walking gradually until you get to the tougher terrain, that's a natural warm-up in the morning. And I find that some people do have, just by fluke, they actually get to do a progression, because from the gravel road they got to walk up the roadaways and then they got to walk through a ditch that's still kind of smooth, and they don't get to the rough stuff for about 5 to 10 minutes. And that 5 to 10 minute walk to that rough stuff is actually functioning as a bit of a body preparation warm-up routine. So sometimes it happens that way. Sometimes you're out of the pickup truck, you're off the edge of the road, and you're in the woods immediately, and you're navigating. And if you took an hour to drive there and you didn't do anything that morning, you did an hour drive in the vehicle, and all of a sudden you're off the shoulder of the road and you're in the thick of the woods, and you're over 40, good luck with that. Robin, I don't know how you're keeping your body in shape to be able to just not do any kind of preparation, but I know that my body would need a little bit of a wake-up call out of the pickup truck before I tried to jump in.
Question for you, Dave. It's Gerard here. Some of our companies are dealing with, an older workforce. They've worked the same way for multiple years. They're not used to incorporating a warm-up or stretches, or they haven't really even thought about or discussed movement at work. But we are seeing slips and trips and fall injuries particularly with that kind of sector in forestry. Any tips or suggestions on how a company can start out that process of getting those workers and motivating them to do that?
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend, especially with an over 50 group, to focus on traditional stretching. You don't want to be changing these people's joint communication early in the morning in ranges of motion that they haven't been in for 20 years and think that that's going to be a good result when they get out into the woods. I'd focus on warming up and priming the pump. So that core push-pull, getting the nervous system activated, taking a normal stride stance, and just doing like a little split squat or a lunge movement within a comfortable range of motion. Make sure that they're not getting overly extended or really feeling huge stretching in the morning. It's more getting blood flow, getting the body going. The movements that they can already do, get them doing those movements before they start working. So it's kind of a toned down warm-up that you want to do, and getting people activated. And so a simple power squat, that doesn't, they don't have to go all the way down, just getting the hips moving, a stride stance, and feeling the hips activating, standing on one leg, that Karate Kid stance. Make it kind of easier stuff that just gets people balancing and gets people on their feet and getting to know your body that morning. That's another important thing. You'd be amazed how little your body has to move to actually get to that shoulder of the road where you're going to have to go into the woods. Getting out of bed, getting to the kitchen table, getting to the pickup truck, dropping in on the lunchroom or in a shack, and then back into the pickup truck. You can actually be facing the woods and really haven't used your body at all yet that morning and been sitting most of the morning. And so just doing some real simple stuff to activate the joints and activate the body can go a long way. So I guess my biggest advice is don't turn it into a big yoga session where people are doing big, wide stances, and, eventually you want to get them working on this stuff. But when you're starting out, just simple and warm up. Think warm up and activation more than you're thinking extreme stretching. Okay?
Okay, that's good advice, because quite often, the people that we would like to follow that routine or do that warm-up, we don't have them. They're not a captive audience for their supervisors. They're truck drivers or equipment operators that are working by themselves, often in remote locations. You see them for a few minutes every day, but you don't really have them for the morning safety meeting necessarily, where everybody can do their warm-ups. So I think that's where we're particularly challenged in the harvesting and trucking side of things. That we've got to get the people to our workers to buy into this so they can do it on their own. We can't actually direct them to do it because we don't see them necessarily that much during the day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of hoping that there will be a younger generation. Hopefully most truck drivers that are kind of 45-ish and younger have seen a generation of truck drivers that have absolutely been broken down to dust from poor suspension and seats in those old-fashioned trucks from the 70s. And has anybody seen kind of a more modern truck driver that actually is aware of their body and kind of keeps themselves in shape outside of work, or is it still kind of the old school truck drivers that you're seeing? Anybody have any inputs on any of the? Go ahead, Rachel.
I think it's mixed. I mean, there's always some people that are more interested in keeping themselves fit and active and really engaged with their families. But we were actually just had a presentation last week, and the presenter was talking about how it's been her experience that the 30, 35-year-old guys are essentially just accepting that their fate will be the same as those that have come before them, and and so we're working hard on trying to change that and to educate people and just get them thinking about it so that they can make the changes in their lives and make these types of things a priority for them, so that they are able to come home from work and play with their kids, and instead of having a backache or whatever the case may be. So.
If you know, one thing you might want to do the scared straight kind of exercise, where you see if you can find just an old school truck driver that went through his career through the 70s, through the real terrible truck designs, and maybe never exercised, never did anything, a couple back surgeries later, and just bring somebody like that to a safety meeting and have them say, you know, if they could do it all again, they'd probably think about some of this stuff, because there's no better teacher than seeing somebody whose body has just been through the ringer and having a heck of a time with all sorts of health conditions. Just say, you know, this can be a very unhealthy job if you don't do anything outside of your job. Because really, what are you doing? You're sitting on your butt all day long, and that requires that you have to change your diet, the way you eat, or the calories are going to pack on. Your body doesn't get full range of motion, so you got to do something about that. I mean, being a professional operator, truck driver, you need a lifestyle that is so rich outside of your job just to keep your body at normal, let alone in shape. And they need to understand that you know, it's not normal for the human body to sit all day. And the same goes with people working at computers. You know, there's too much sitting work out there. So people need to understand how the human body is designed, what it needs to stay healthy, and incorporate that into their workday. And that's where micro breaks and little breaks during the day for truck drivers and machine operators. That's another one of my pet peeves. There's downtime for a certain machine for whatever reason, and you look up and there's the operator with their feet up and a paper back out, and they're slouching their back, and they're just putting more stress through their body and less movement instead of getting out and moving around. So all this stuff, the education on all this stuff is absolutely crucial for the younger generation especially. So, okay, so the warm-up, and then now I want to talk a little bit about some of the things we've developed for some of our larger clients are getting in this. You guys have a warm-up program. Here's a little checklist that I just wanted to show. Here's for Fortis, we just did a slip trip prevention checklist that their safety leaders can actually, are warm-ups happening? Are there micro breaks during the workday? Yes, no, and was feedback given on their tours? Okay. Prepare the work area and equipment. Do people actually look at their walking paths? Okay. Are the boots in good repair and laced to the top? You actually look at the boots. Same with the office area. You look for trip hazards. Are people parking equipment in safe areas to get in and out of? And are there extra steps folded down? Are there steps and grab handles? Going through that 3-point contact exercise. If it's a shop environment, how is the housekeeping and spills handled? And then moving safe, controlling the speed of descent. Are people dropping to the ground, or are they lowering themselves down easily? Okay. Do people actually look before they leap, and are they choosing the safest path? Sometimes it's hard to observe that out in the bush, but this is what works for this organization. You might be able to you'd be surprised what you can put on a checklist for a safety program to actually look for this kind of stuff. Okay. And then I've been talking a lot about core stability and moving in the right places. We've started with some of our larger clients that want to really get into this stuff. We've developed a kind of a muscle and balance, movement balance program, and it's three simple drills that we have them do. I can get myself on camera. I had it on video, but I'll just put myself in the camera here. See if you can see me. So the Karate Kid was the one where I'll just put the camera down a little bit here. And doing this in a safety, I'll do it sideways, kind of at a 45. So there's the Karate Kid one where you do this, and this will be fun for people to see if they can do, because this next move actually requires that they get some core stability as well. So it's called the airplane drill, and you get into this pike position. I don't know if you can see my leg out behind. And you basically just do this airplane stance, and you see how long people can actually hold that airplane position and stabilize what's going on in the body when you get into that horizontal airplane position. The core stability, the hip stability, the knee stability, the foot and ankle. If you have a fault anywhere in that movement chain, it's going to come out in a hurry, and that can increase your risk for slips and trips. And it's a simple thing to do to give people a wake-up call of where their body's at. If you put people into the airplane position and then you want their shoulders to be horizontal, you don't want to see them sort of banking to the left or right when they get in that position. That's a compensation. That can be a really good wake-up call for people to let them know that their body's out of balance or they got some issues left to right. And that's the kind of fun stuff you can do in a safety meeting that's directly related to slip trips. Maybe it's enough to jog somebody into getting some help with their body or getting into shape. But bringing up the fact that your body matters with respect to your job, especially when you have, walking in the outside area or up and down off equipment. If your body gets let go and your body loses its ability to move properly, you're going to increase your risk of injury. You're going to deteriorate before your time. Your body's going to age. You're going to be that 48-year-old low back x-ray up on the x-ray box with your doctor, and your doctor saying, you're 48 years old and your back is 75 years old. All these things that too many workers hear from their physicians, and the bad knees, the bad backs, all that stuff comes from your body getting out of balance, not moving properly, and you just keep pushing it without having your body come back to where it needs to be. So we've developed some screens, some different things that are fun to do during safety meetings and stuff, and you can have a chat with me offline if you're interested in any of that stuff. But talking about the body during your safety meetings, okay? Bring in a trainer from your local gym and do a little core stability workshop and see how many people actually can fire their core, right? It's super important to balancing and walking in uneven terrain. Have a trainer come in and give people a wake-up call on how balanced is their body, how activated is their core. Just keep putting it in front of people until they realize that this stuff's important, and that's all part of expectations, okay? Bringing in a boot rep, okay, that knows a lot about boots. Educate your employees on what they should be looking for in boots. Making sure that you keep all this stuff as an expectation, and the way you show employees what is important and valuable is what you value as an organization and what you keep talking about in safety meetings and stuff. And so if fitness and proper body use is important, you'll include that in your organization's resources, okay? So very important stuff. Okay, and I think we are getting to the end of the, this is where we were. We talked about boots, observation. Here's the exercise program. There's a workbook that has been provided as well that has some of the exercises that will challenge core stability and challenges the body in some of the ways that we've been talking about. So make sure you look through that. There's good descriptions and stuff as well. Yeah, all this stuff basically sets expectations that this stuff's important. Okay, so that's about it. Maybe we'll just open it up if anybody has any questions or comments on any of this stuff. Maybe we can go around the horn.
Robin here. Wow, I'm very impressed with your knowledge in this topic there. That's commendable. One suggestion you had about the older worker, I remember when I was younger being around someone that had worked in the bush a lot, and noticed in the evening when he was walking around that I could hear some noise, and it seemed like coming from his legs. And he said, "Oh yeah, from all the the jumping that I've been doing in the bush over my career, my cartilage is no longer there, and it's bone on bone." Well, that certainly slowed down my ideas of jumping off of logs as much as I'd been doing in my career up till then. And fortunately, I remembered that experience, and when you were speaking about it here today, I still remember that incident of that person to this day. So that's an excellent tip.
Yeah, that's another example. Getting an old timer to come to a safety meeting and talk about how his knees are shot. That was one of the biggest things that I noticed when I started following fallers around in the bush and watching how a lot of the fallers would jump around. And, you know, a lot of them had knee problems. And as they get older, fallers that are over 40 have to keep their body weight. I was with one guy, he says, yeah, I got to stay under 173 pounds. If I get to 175 pounds, there's too much pressure through my knees, and I've beaten my knees up to the point where I can't make it through the day because my knees get too sore. If I stay under 173 pounds, my knees don't bother me. So this guy had gotten his knees to the point where it regulated his body weight because he couldn't work if he got too heavy. And so, I mean, upper body weight when you're walking through the woods, super important. And this hopping down, I mean, you made it. That's a super good point. I hope I stressed that enough, that coming down off equipment or off of logs, that jolting. I mean, if you remember when you're a kid and you jump on the bathroom scale, it's like 3 to 5 times your body weight coming through your knees. So that needs to kind of become a bit of a non-starter in an organization, where the expectation should be that you sit down and slide off of logs, you don't jump off logs. And if anybody has witnessed, you know, jumping down from a height, that needs to be a bit of a safety violation, where you get a talking to. Look, you ask any logger, anybody that's been in the woods a lot, how that worked out for them over the years, you won't find one person that says, yeah, jumping down off logs, one of the best things I ever did. My knees feel great now that I'm 60, 70 years old. So I think there's enough information out there to make that a non-starter for organizations.
Yeah, just building on that, remember you mentioned about some of these equipment that folks are carrying in the bush there now. You get 30, 40, 50 pounds in a cruising vest, and you start jumping. You know, that's not simulating what you're going to be seeing in a gymnasium kind of experience. And I found over time too that weight in the vest and all the stuff that I needed to carry was definitely weighing on my shoulders and just causing extra strain. So I still wear when I do have to pack a lot of weight and doing that kind of thing, I have the vest underneath, but I do have a really good high quality backpack for carrying the weight. And then when we get to the spot where we're going to put in the plot or do the actual work, then I physically actually take off the backpack and just put in the pockets the things that I need and reduce the weight. And also with the crew, if it's a 2 or 3 person crew, making sure that everyone has equal weight and not someone carrying an unusual heavy amount of the weight. And even having one person just with a good quality backpack with maybe a bit more weight can work as well.
Very good points. I'm glad you brought that up, Robin. Those are wonderful points. And the other thing I like about a backpack once in a while is that if you're facing a very precarious area, it's great to take a backpack off and kind of, chuck it down and then make it down that precarious slope without the backpack. And it's kind of a nice option to unload yourself when you really need all your body's ability. Because face it, there's some scenarios where you're kind of like Spider-Man getting around, and the last thing you want is a heavy backpack on your back when you're trying to make it through. And if your backpack can live through a bit of slide the backpack down the hill a bit and pick it up partway down and throw it down a little bit more, that can be a nice option to have. That's great. Any other comments?
Yeah, just one comment regarding your suggestion about the safety meetings. I liked the idea of actually walking them through getting in and out of the machine and giving them some what ifs, while they're doing it. Okay, so right now, if you happen to slip, what are you possibly going to hit on the way down, and what's that going to do to you? I really like that idea, and I'm definitely going to build it into my site meetings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's wonderful. And as far as rushing, I can't stress enough. I'm a huge believer in kind of auditing, observation. I find that people every once in a while need to be supervised. They need to be, and if you ask WorkSafe, they need to be supervised a lot. But even workers that work alone, you need, and if people are not in the practice of doing something, a lot of times they'll be honest with you. And if you just show up and say, yeah, just checking in, wanted to visit where you're working and what you're up to, and go through things like, are you doing any kind of body preparation before you tackle the bush? Are you, let's see your 3-point contact in your machine. Go through some stuff. Look at the boots. Do you have a strategy for keeping the mud off the boots? It's been raining for the last week. And just go through a checklist and get people thinking about this stuff. And if none of the stuff is hitting it, set the expectation. This is important. This is something that we're doing. Here's a few micro breaks to do, because sitting on your butt all day is not good for your body. All that kind of stuff is good to do, to just remind people. Okay, who's next? Patricia, or who hasn't made a little summary yet?
Yeah, we had Trish and Ashley that we had a few login problems. They logged in late. Ashley or Trish, did you have any questions? Did we hit the mark with this webinar for you? Were you able to get the information that you needed for your company? And
do you know how to unmute? She came in.
It is possible that they don't have mic.
Oh, here's Patricia.
But I unmuted both Ashley and Trish. If you have any comments, feel free to share.
I've enjoyed it immensely. One of our employees just tripped and hurt his knee, so this has been very helpful, and I've just enjoyed it a lot and learned a lot.
Great, that's good to hear. Thank you. I think probably if there's no more questions, I think what I'll do now is I'm just going to show you where you can look on the BC Forest Safety Council's website for additional information on slips, trips, and falls. But before I do that, I just want to say a big thank you to Dave for doing the presentation today. As people have mentioned, there's a lot of good information that was presented, and he's given us a lot to think about and implement in our company. So thank you very much, Dave.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
And I will just switch it off of Dave's computer and onto mine. And now everybody should be looking at a picture of the BC Forest Safety Council's website. And I just want to briefly show you where to go on our website to find that resource package. So you'll see my pointer hovering over where it says Safety Info and Tools. Just click there. And once you're into this particular site, you want to find the heading there, the menu that says Resource Packages. And my pointer, again, is just hovering over that. Click on Resource Packages, and it will open up a page with all sorts of resource packages about avalanches, bears. But the third one from the top is Slips, Trips, and Falls resource package. So I would encourage everybody to have a look at that. In addition to the webinar, lots of great information about preventing these sorts of injuries with your particular company. And if you just scroll down to the bottom of this page, you'll see that you can actually download a PDF document of the resource package. And also, we have a previously recorded version of the Slips, Trips, and Falls webinar, but we've also recorded Dave's presentation today, and a link to that presentation will be up on this site as well. So if there's portions of the presentation you'd like to share with your workforce, please do.